also wanted to look at some other things and tie revenues and expenditures together, because sometimes when we're looking at the budget and looking at cutting expenditures, there is a revenue attached to it. And when you're cutting the one, you're not really saving much because you lost that revenue too. So I wanted to look at that. And let's see, I also wanted to give you a little idea on how the budget is currently constructed, so you'll get an idea of what's in there and what's not.
Sure.
Which you'll be, of course, free to change, but just so you'll get a feel for how it looks right now. And the way I did the budget, the real estate and personal property are 1/3 of our total revenues, and those numbers come from Lisa Baker. And they're in your section 1 of your tab for the book. And like I said, I picked those numbers up exactly as she gave them to us. And she has already taken into account those things that are in land conservancy or whatever. The other items, I went through the December 31st financials, because when I was working on this, that was the last thing that we had closed at that time. And it made it very easy because that was half a year. So I could just look and for a lot of things just say, okay, assuming things stay the same the second half of the year, I can double it. And that will be our expected income. For recreation fees, I used Jacob's estimate. I still think it's too high.
Right.
Last year we had estimated $45,000. Haven't gotten anywhere near that. This next year, he says it'll be likely $37,000. I don't know that it will be.
Right.
So that's one you might want to look at coming down on. I don't know how much you want to come down on it, but I still think it's too high.
Right.
Court fines were way down.
What was that?
Court fines. Court
Yeah, right,
fines.
right.
Because court has not been held, there have not been nearly the fines.
Well, also, now you can, in lieu of fines and costs, you can do community service.
Yeah.
You also hasn't there been a push, maybe I'm wrong about this, on some, maybe more leniency in some areas on traffic violations?
So I mean, that's the whole push nearly a year ago, almost this July, that, for some driving infractions, you could fines and costs would be done in community service.
So wasn't there a period of time when you almost couldn't even?
On the onset of COVID, there was something.
There were some that weren't enforced.
Yeah.
Our interest on bank deposits is way down.
Right.
As we're benefiting from the lower interest rates, on the other end, we're not earning as much either. Sheriff's fees are way down. And I'm sure that's all tied to this also.
Yeah.
However, sheriff's background fees are way up. I would like to take our attention to page 3 on the bottom, where we have all the refunds right above the total local revenue. Page 3 of the revenue section.
Of this book you gave us?
Yes. The whole refund section, I wanted to kind of discuss how we do that, because you'll see in past years we budgeted to receive insurance, miscellaneous bank charges, miscellaneous receipts, and this year I don't have any of that budgeted. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to explain why. Most of our insurance refunds are because of traffic, vehicle claims. Mm-hmm. Most of those are the sheriff's office. We have a few from solid waste and EMS, but the bulk of them are the sheriff's office. When we get reimbursed from VACOR, what Tara does is she prepares a budget transfer sheet where she asks for an increase in authority for revenue and an increase in authority to expend for repairs. That is because she doesn't want the sheriff's regular repair line to absorb that. They want that line to be used for regular maintenance. And it's not just on vehicles, it's on radios and other things as well. So if we had all the traffic accidents, repairs going against that line, it would wipe it out very, very quickly. Especially some of these bigger accidents where it's really done a lot of damage to the car. So she does the revenue and expenditure every time. Well, that insurance refund has already been built into the budget. Not the authority to expend, but the authority to receive. So we are actually building into the budget something that we are going to turn around and recognize later. When I saw that that was how it worked, what happens is for EMS and solid waste, when we have a claim and get reimbursed, I have not been doing that budget transfer, but in a way that penalizes them because that means their repair budget is having to absorb that cost. And they need their repair line just the same way the sheriff's office does. So my recommendation is we don't budget to receive anything, and all claim reimbursements are handled the same way with the budget transfer. So that's, if you saw that and wondered why we've always budgeted in the past, why haven't we this year? That's why I took it out.
Moving forward, do you want to do that for moving forward
I
all
would
the time?
recommend that just because one, it gives you.
It's not just COVID, so what I'm.
Yes, this is
Yeah,
not
okay.
COVID related.
Gotcha.
I just think it provides a clearer picture
Right.
of how much were our actual insurance collections.
Right.
And it provides a clearer picture, and you could look at your original budgeted amount of expenditures and what was finally appropriated, and it tells you how much was for regular and how much was for repairs because of accidents.
Right.
I just think it provides a cleaner picture all around.
So in terms of what you just described, do we put a separate line and not just let it absorb into repairs, or just leave it there?
I think that would become a nightmare to
Okay.
try to keep up with.
Yeah.
Because
basically-
then every time I got a repair bill, I'd be having to say, well,
Was this
because
an
of
accident?
this?
Was it insurance? Right.
Yeah, was this normal wear and
Right.
tear? Was that, yeah.
Okay.
But I think it'll very quickly give us that picture anyway.
Okay.
Page 5. State revenue. You'll see state revenue is way down. And there's a couple of things that are the reason for that make total sense. One is they expect less in public assistance, but because they expect, right now their budget is built with less in expenditures, so therefore there's less expected revenue for the DSS.
Right.
If it turns out their expenditures were higher, of course that number was going to go higher. And also it's all the grants that we had budgeted in fiscal year 21 for the EDA building construction in the phase 2 Commerce Park. There's a couple of different ways we can handle this because most of that money is still intact. Having appropriated it at the end of this year, we can either do a carryover of both the revenues and the expenditures, which might be the cleanest way to do it, or we could reappropriate it into fiscal year 22. Personally, I think just doing the carryover makes more sense, but that's what is causing that huge decline you're seeing. Here's the biggest surprise. Local sales tax did a lot better than we expected.
Yeah.
That's fabulous news.
People stay away from Walmart.
Yeah.
Big stores in there.
They are.
Yeah, people have been shopping locally.
Yep.
We're also getting our share of online purchases.
Right.
All that's helped us. I'd like to briefly talk about something we had talked about before, and when we were talking about meals tax. And how the fund has grown. Well, that's not the only fund that's affected this way. We have several funds, 10 fire and rescue. The only money you should budget to receive there ought to be the money that we're turning around and giving out for expenditures. We've got 4 for life for rescue, and we've got the state fire funds for fire department. So we need to budget receiving them and expending them. We're just a flow-through agency. Fund 35 is the law library fund. That grows very incrementally every year. I didn't budget anything for that because I have not gotten any expenditure request to spend it. But it's growing, but it can only be used for, I believe, probably the judge and Commonwealth attorney for any books or online subscriptions and things. I need to talk to them. Possibly some of the other things they have could be spent out of this line. It's one of those kind of forgotten things.
The amount of changes that's come out last year and this year, they may need to update their library.
Yeah, they might need to go into their fund balance.
Yeah.
But that's why we had 1,500 budgeted in the past and I have nothing, unless they are looking at expending.
Right.
They could be spending out of fund balance. Same with the courthouse maintenance fund. Now, this one I really want to bring to your attention. Last year we budgeted 3,500, but did not budget to expend anything. We have got a roof that really needs replacement. I talked to Kenny and Mark. Kenny says the membrane needs replacing desperately. Mark said we are on the borrowed time. It's past the life of it and we're on the grace period.
Right.
Kenny and Mark both feel like the replacement of the roof at Co-op Extension and adding the slight slope has helped tremendously with that building. And they think the same thing, the courthouse could benefit by having that same kind of construction.
Yeah.
Just this morning I asked Mark how much did we spend over here and what is it likely to cost at the courthouse, and this is totally off the hip. He and I both recall it costing about $35,000.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
We're not positive, I haven't looked at the records,
So
but
it was
that's
like
what we both.
37, but
Yeah.
that's close
Sounds
enough.
about right.
Yeah,
The
that's
last
what
time
we-
it was done.
37, yeah, that's just the number that popped into my head when you started
Yeah.
talking about it.
So that's what we were recalling. We think the courthouse roof likely 5 times as big.
Yeah, I was gonna say
So we're
at least
saying maybe
3.
5 times the amount. And construction costs are higher now. We're thinking it may be at least 200,000. The thing is, this courthouse maintenance fund has not been touched, and we have 90-some-odd thousand in there. This might take us halfway there. But
Yeah.
something to keep in mind as we're working through, we may not have to come up with all the money out of the general fund. We might have half of it already.
Do you recall the last time it was re-roofed?
Mark said,
Oh,
he said that we're on the extended grace period, so I'm going to guess at least
I
20
can
years.
remember I've done it, but
I want to say somewhere between '05 and '09 or something.
What are they,
Something like that,
15-year roofs?
Something
Or
like
maybe a little earlier.
about the time they got it off, it hurricane or something come through
And
and
then
that washed us out, you
I
know.
started in '07 and '08 ever since. So it's been before.
Well, the hurricane that came through was in '02, that big one that came up.
But I can't remember if it was hurricane or big snow, but anyway, whatever it was, it turned their bed of water right down the courthouse. And, even the judge wouldn't have it.
Might have been '02, '03. something
Well, then
like that.
that would be right, because that's when that hurricane came through in September of '02.
I brought it up in the-
To start.
I brought it up in the '90s. I brought it up then, and I feel obligated to bring it up again while we're discussing it. We keep going back with these flat roofs and trying to modify. We keep putting the money back into it. I recommend that we look at some point, whether it's this time, next time, whatever, at some point, we look at what they did like at, Woolwine Elementary. They actually put a raised gable roof on that building. It doesn't look And we don't have to do green. I'm not, I know I put green on my buildings, but that's just different. You know, we could do something more complimentary, and you can still do it where you can access those units that's on the roof.
That's what I was gonna ask.
I asked Mark about that, and he was saying he didn't know that we could do an actual sloped roof, but if we added a slope like what they did next door, because the chiller units and other equipment's up there that has to be accessible, he said perhaps they could do the slope and do flashing around
Right.
those things.
Okay.
But as far as actually taking it off and putting a sloped roof, you wouldn't have a place for your chiller and other things.
Well, build a new wall on top of that.
If we make too big, well, I agree with you, don't get me wrong, but if we a little bit bigger, change the colors and all, don't the judge have to get involved in that?
Not necessarily.
Fair amount. Not like it used to be, but he still like it.
I feel like it'd be nice.
Well, you recommended that.
It would be somebody you're gonna have at the table talking.
But my point is,
Right.
we keep spending the money on these flat roofs, we've done it in the schools, we're doing it on new renovate, everywhere we do it, we keep putting these flat roofs.
I had a flat roof on my house in Carroll County. And the whole time I lived there, I was fighting that roof. And so I agree, you know, even if you just put a 2-inch slope on it,
Something.
just enough to move the water. And what is catching up on us, these buildings sort of like me, age is catching up on us. You know, and we've been band-aiding them for years. I mean, no reflection on past boards or anything like that. But we tried to save taxpayers money, and we band-aid it. And I'm a big advocate. If you got a problem, fix it, and then you don't have to pay for all the band-aids. You know? So in the long run, you save money.
Okay. But what does that mean to the courthouse?
Well, I just wanted to let you know that we have this pot of money available.
Right.
It wouldn't take us all the way there, but it might take us
Halfway.
halfway, maybe.
But what's worrying me is what damage they're gonna find inside once Mark starts re-looking at that.
Mark said he went over there and looked, and he said there's some places, he said the insulation's going to need to be taken out and replaced. There's places where the plaster needs to be taken out and redone, or sheet board put up and painting. He says so far structurally is anything really serious. He doesn't think it's had any serious compromises, but there are some known.
Most, from what I remember the last time that I was involved, it was mostly cosmetic,
Yeah.
or what you would call cosmetic, but that's still not cheap. Well, don't have a hard time when I say this, but I hope whoever's sitting here in the future, when they look to build the new administration building, they don't put a flat roof on it.
Talk to my granddaughter about that shit, yeah.
Because it is gonna be before this board, and I think it's gonna be sooner than later.
I gave y'all an option one time, you passed it.
So you don't plan on being here now?
Not that far in the future, I don't think.
Keep coming back.
Well, sometimes I get asked to come back and I do it.
Picking on you.
Yeah, I know. One fellow told me, he says, you know, you can't complain about any of it. I said, I know what I was getting into. He said, yeah, you've been there enough, you know, so I don't hear no complaints. So,
You got a chance, you've been gone and still come back.
gone and still come back.
I told them 2 terms, and they ended up putting in year 3, and I told them, I said, y'all forget that for the 4th term. We're not even going to have that discussion. So
Good.
2.5 years, and then you can have your bill.
Glutton for punishment.
Fund 70 is court fines and fees. Again, that can only be used for certain items. And I did not budget to receive anything. I would have to talk to Rhonda and Nikki about what they might expect. But again, we shouldn't budget to receive unless we're also looking to expend. And I don't know what they can expend against it, if anything can be moved there, but I'd have to check with them. And then, of course, the other one, the big one that we've talked about quite a bit is the meals tax fund, Fund 230. And we have the recommendation from Davenport on what's meals tax and spending for the recreation building out of that, and then planning on using $175,000 of the ongoing expected revenues to pay our debt service. So far, we haven't done anything, but at the time I prepared this budget, we had not talked about using it at all, so I didn't put any money into it. If during the course of working on the budget, you make the decision to go forward with the rec building, this is where you would want to do it, and if you're looking at a debt service payment, we would have to put it in there at that time. Just the other day, I created the capital reserve fund and set it up for $197,000 as you approved at the last meeting. So in your February financials, you'll see that new line. And if we go scenario 2, they recommended that we use $12,000 out of it for this next fiscal year. So that's it as far as that I had as far as revenues. Before I get into expenditures, do you have any questions?
I do.
Okay.
Back on page 1, where you're showing where the treasurer's showing the real estate numbers, and we're at 96.5%. That's included, those numbers right there, that was according to the summary that we received in our last board packet, we're at 96.5%. But that's counting in also in that summary where we delayed the June payment to August.
Yes.
And see, the auditor drew that back.
They'll draw it back, but then we'll be picking up the June one from this year.
Right, so when we pick up the June one from this year, it's gonna show all 3 of those.
Our financials will show all
Right.
3, but the auditors.
Actual auditors will move it back.
Correct.
All right, I just wanna make sure I
Yes.
understood
Right.
that
Yes.
process.
Right now it's showing 2, and we normally only show 1 at this point.
Right, and that's where the 96% comes in at.
Yes.
Back on the fire and rescue. If I can find it. And you touched on it somewhat a while ago. Now, by ordinance, we're assessing 1 penny for the fire and rescue, but we're not showing it in this fire and rescue line item.
Correct.
Could you explain that again as to why? I mean, I understand that it all goes into the general fund, it's in one pot,
Yes.
and it's accounted for separately.
Correct.
Now, EMS, we pay for EMS and that's the paid staff and that stuff out of it. But we also have expenses that go into with the fire department and the rescue squad. How come we show 0 there all the time?
We always show 0 because EMS expenditures so far exceed what we collect that it eats up that 1 cent. In fact, every year if you look at your audited financial statements, you'll see that the fire and rescue funds have 1.2 million deficit. That's because that 1 cent tax collection does not begin to cover what we put out for fire, rescue, and EMS. So we don't put it in this fund. We certainly don't want to give the impression that there's money there available for them to expend, and the EMS, which is in the general fund, is using it all.
And it's been that way. This changed sometime after we did the paid staff.
Probably. I came on right about the same time we did the paid staff.
I think when Joe and I first were elected, the fund was actually in the positive.
Oh, okay.
And it's been slowly going down ever since. I want to say there was just under $1 million in the fund 9 budgets ago, 10 budgets ago. So, you know, it's been slipping ever since, but we've had to add more and more EMS.
Right.
And we bought some fire trucks and ambulances and everything. At the time.
Right.
We've definitely spent faster than what we brought in that one time.
Right.
The tools.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of expenditure over the last 10 years. Millions and millions of dollars, as reflected by the fund being in the negative now.
Well, and one reason it went down was because at one point the board zeroed that number out, didn't it?
Every year, the auditors do a cost allocation plan where they look at spreading the cost. And every year since I've been here, they've been coming up with, this fund is in the negative and you might want to zero it out and absorb it, but we haven't done it yet.
If it was in the positive at some point and zeroed out, that happened before our time because we didn't do that.
I'm thinking it happened somewhere between 96 and 2002, or somewhere in that general area. Because at one point in time, that fund had $1 million in it. And that was where all fire and rescue expenses were coming out of. It was all volunteer at that time.
I'd have to go back and look at the others. I think it was about 900,000 when I was elected. But we spent at a rate faster than what it comes in, so eventually it just slowly.
Well, at one point, I think it was taken to zero for a long time, and that's what drained it down. Or that put a drain because you didn't have funding coming in.
Well, if you figure right now, we're spending, I actually looked at the amount we're spending on this EMS is probably.
There's no way to cover it in that fund.
But I mean, we're only bringing in less than 200,000 a year, so it's gonna drop drastically.
Yeah, and it's gonna continue.
Yeah.
So basically,
So I'm sure it was zeroed out at some point, but it wasn't purposely money taken
Oh,
away.
wow.
no, I didn't mean that. I'm talking about the tax levy was zero. In other words, you didn't have more revenue coming in. At one point, I think it was taken to zero,
It's been once and something.
Well, and then it was brought back to one.
I don't know.
But
That was back.
for a number of years, that's been basically coming out of the general fund, period. It's being paid for other than the $189,000.
Right.
It's been paid for out of the general tax fund. So,
I thought you meant that.
no, I didn't mean they milked the money. I meant,
I see what you're saying. I was thinking that you.
we'll have to talk about that after a while, because when we got to zero in the bank, there's a technicality there that actually happened. On paper it didn't, but in the bank it did. Because when we had zero fund balance, that was total fund balance.
Oh, yeah.
So, there was some,
Back before my time.
yes, and it was before I came back on the board too, so. I guess I question, given the circumstances and we know what's going, I question the need to continue that in that format.
That was I was gonna say, but I mean.
Well, really, no, I mean, we're absorbing the cost in the general tax fund, or under the general taxes. That 1 penny, I don't know that we need to continue it designated in that format.
Yeah, I don't know the legalities as far as how it was set up that way,
When
whether
it
it
was
was by
originally
money.
set up, wasn't it done by referendum?
It was done by a public hearing, and then the board of supervisors, it wasn't voted on by the public, it was a public hearing. And that ordinance was adopted.
So it was an ordinance that we can go back to public hearing.
And one of the things we did, at one point it was 7 cents,
Right.
I believe.
Yeah. That's when.
And then part of our adjustment, when we got down to zero, we dropped it from 7 to 5, that account,
Right.
but we didn't have to have a public hearing on it. So in essence, what we did was we transferred 2 cents from that to the general expenses.
But to eliminate it, you'd have to go to public hearing.
To eliminate it, you would have to go to public hearing. Or no, you could zero it out. You could leave the ordinance in place you could leave the line item and you could zero it out. It's similar process like we did with the, what was
But that
it?
still wouldn't solve your accounting issue where you're showing a negative balance every year.
No.
I mean, it would actually make it worse.
Well, yeah, but I was answering your question. I think we ought to do, I think it's come to the time where we do away with that. We either need to do away with it or shift more of the responsibility to it.
It's kind of where I was leaning. What did you say it was? What did you say? When it was up at 7 cents, we built what?
And when it was adopted, there was 4 fire trucks bought for the county. They're all the same. That's why that was like 86, 87. There's 4 tankers, 1 for each station.
When that had the 7 cents in it, it kept building.
Right.
And that's where machinery and equipment and operations for the fire, basically everything was attributed to that. But that was prior to the.
And services have changed over the years. In the 80s, it was mostly fire directed.
Right.
And now it's really changed.
EMS.
With the
I'm
hiring.
glad he said 5, because I can remember when they got out them trucks, and they said something about 5 cents. People was jumping up and down. I don't know why we was giving them all this money. The county's buying all these trucks. But it, they just didn't understand what was going on.
Oh, that was a stir.
Hmm.
I think accounting wise, it'd be just as well off to just eliminate that ordinance.
Well, is it better to just leave well enough alone?
So,
That's the other option.
Well, you're still showing that deficit every time.
Understood.
but the accountant, I mean, our
Auditors.
auditors are not jumping up down on it normally, are they?
Yeah.
I've never seen it in there.
No, it's never popped up in the morning.
I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed, I
No, I understand what you're saying.
I just, that may.
For me, it's cleaner.
It is.
Yeah, I hear that.
It may be hard to explain.
It would be.
Right.
That's what
It looks like we're taking something away.
Right.
And the flip side of it is, I know back before I was on the board and was on the fire department, that when it was 5 cents, before it went down to 1, and there was several $1 million shown in the account, but there was no money in the bank,
Right.
because they had spent the
Mm-hmm.
fund balance.
What I was talking about.
It caused a lot of ripples because people said, well, we're just gonna go buy a truck, they've got to give it to us because it's our money. And so I think there was some misunderstanding about the way that it worked. And also some misunderstanding between, right now, you've got EMS, you've got volunteer rescue, and you've got fire. So, volunteer rescue might say, that $2 million is mine, and then fire might say that, so I think it just caused a conflict too, if you start building up a big balance in that account too.
But if you do away with it, then that's clear, everything comes out of the general taxes. Just food for thought,
Which is
nothing.
what's happening.
Which is what's
Which
already
is
happened.
what's happening.
For everything except designated money in the state.
Yeah.
Any other revenues before we go into expenditures?
I wish you'd find some.
As we go through our budget, in the past years, we've constantly looked at ways to cut expenditures. We also need to be thinking about revenues. Are there revenues coming in that have not been considered here that we need to add? Have I estimated too low? Could be, as we keep working through this over the next couple of months, it will become evident that I have estimated some of these things too low.
This is a very hard year.
That's
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
doing the best, it's the best guess scenario,
Yeah.
all the way around.
When I did this budget, before we've always looked at like what's gone on in the previous year. This year, at both what happened in fiscal year 20 and what's been going on so far in
Right.
fiscal year 21,
Right.
because I couldn't assume that 20 was going to be a reflection of 22.
It's almost like you had to go back to 19.
No, I went to 21 because with COVID, I mean,
Right.
20 was very similar to 19, which is similar to 18.
Okay, right, gotcha,
21
gotcha,
was
right, right.
something.
But at the same time, from March to July, we did not see much of a impact, did we? Or did we not?
We may not have, but it was because there was like a 2-month delay on a lot
Correct.
of things, but once
July
the
1 hit.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yep, it hit.
And with state and federal revenues too, we had some, they had finally gotten to where they were reimbursing on time. And then since COVID's hit, I think they fell back a little bit, not bad, but they're a little bit, not like it once was where you, in the start of the third quarter, you get your first quarter payments, but we haven't had that for a while, thank goodness.
No.
I'm gonna go on record as saying, I think that how you have estimated and, working with Terry prior to Dr. Millsap's taking over, I mean, I don't view that you did any kind of pie in the sky revenue projections. You were always pretty much straight on, and if anything, you maybe were a little more conservative than
well,
They're
you
not, and I
you
think-
do lowball revenues and you highball expenditures.
Right. Right, exactly.
And hope
So-
they meet in the middle.
Exactly.
And so, for me, I just say kudos and however you wanna, try to direct, those estimates. I lean on your expertise.
Well, one person, it always helps to have all the other.
Absolutely.
There may be things I didn't think about, or as time goes on, more things become revealed to us.
That's the key.
Yes.
I think that's the key. More things will become revealed, but, it's almost like you feel like you're kinda sort of walking blind
Yeah.
through some of this.
Although less blind than we were last March.
Right, that's true.
We really felt
Amen to
blind.
that.
Oh,
We didn't know what was gonna happen the next day, much less next year.
Yeah.
I have one more thing. We do have a potential revenue stream. We've been screaming for it for years. The General Assembly gave it to us, and it involves this right here.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, cigarette tax.
Mhm.
Yep.
I think we need to look and figure out how the state's assessing their tax right now. That'll give us some idea, and I've spoken to Cindy about this earlier. Figure out how they're assessing it per pack, per whatever, and then see what a potential 40-cent cigarette tax, that's the limit, what that would do as far as bringing revenue in.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a tobacco user, you all know it. I choose to do that. I look at this,
User tax.
I look at this a little different than I do the real estate and personal property and normal taxes. It's kind of like a meals tax. If I'm gonna eat out, I know I'm gonna have to pay that meals tax. If I'm gonna use a tobacco product, I know there's gonna be a tax on it. Now, that's not gonna make some people happy, but I think there may be enough there that if we go with the Davenport recommendation, we might be able to go 2 cents instead of 3 cents, just on that alone. I don't know till we get to figures.
I gotta pay taxes on this truck out here to use it, basically. So why not pay taxes on your tobacco?
For me, I think
Counties
it's,
get rich. but
It's
I
kind
don't
of like
know.
alcohol taxes, but, I throw it all in there together, that's a choice.
well, it's a choice, but I think it's only equitable as we've already passed the meals tax. I think, to not pursue it with some diligence is kind of a little disrespectful in some degrees, because you're already paying meals tax.
Right.
You're paying these other taxes, and it's just being equitable across the board. I mean, there's a choice, as you're saying, Mr. Beast, to use tobacco, there's a choice to eat out, there's a choice for these things, and I just would have a hard time not looking into it, knowing that we put people in a position to pay meals tax probably more broadly than we would with the tobacco tax. Does that make sense? I think it's just being equitable across the board.
Well, even the personal property, like you were talking about the truck, I mean, you can look at my truck, there's, one of the reasons I drive a piece of junk is because I don't pay taxes. There's other reasons, because, Calvin's into it.
But if you choose to go get a brand new one, not the first year, you wait till after January 1.
Right.
The first year, you don't pay anything, and that's another whole argument for later.
Right.
Oh,
Now you sound like my wife.
Well, she and I were on the same side years ago. We just couldn't get somebody else to go along with it.
I'm not sure about this relationship.
If you purchase that new vehicle, there's a certain amount of taxes that come with it.
Right,
But again, you're not forced to purchase it, you choose to.
it's a user fee, a user tax,
And
sin
I
tax.
think, don't tell me why, it's not up here, it's down here. I think we can see a bigger impact on our revenue than what we might think.
All for starting going down that trail and looking into it. I don't know what we need to do.
Now,
You know, save us-
I am concerned, I will say this, I'm not opposed to working with the other areas.
I was gonna say, didn't we look into the other,
But
the localities?
Brought it up in a couple of the managers' calls.
Right.
At first, nobody else was interested. Oh, when Terry was on, they were, and then when I got on, they didn't sound like they were, but now they're all looking at their budgets and they're getting more interested.
I have a concern.
Okay.
I don't have a problem working with the other groups. I don't have a problem having a universal stamp for a general area.
Right,
But before we enter into the agreement, I wanna know how it's gonna be collected. Are we gonna collect it here and keep it here? Is it gonna be collected and sent to a central location, then dispersed
then divvy it
back?
up, yeah.
How is it gonna be dispersed?
Oh, absolutely,
Is it gonna be by population or actual sales?
yes.
How much are they gonna charge out of it in part of the agreement to administer it?
So now, Justin, isn't our new River Valley Regional Commission weren't they involved, I thought, in studying this regional approach and the stamp? And remember a couple of meetings, like when I first joined on, I think that was a topic. Do you remember?
Don't. Seems like everything's been so
Yeah, I know.
housing right now,
I know.
that housing and COVID implementation.
I know.
I don't remember that. I'm not saying it didn't happen. but
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I just remember, I mean, it might be a call to Kevin Bird, to kind of, reorient us on that. Because I think they were figuring out how that was gonna work, because that was the first thing I thought of. I mean, it's one thing to go into this pandemic on a regional approach, it's another thing, but when we're talking about our, revenues, it's a whole other
When you
story.
have real talks,
Right.
That's my only fear is, I guess, perception, people, we put that out there and then everybody says, oh, our money's going to Montgomery, another locality, excuse me, and it's being administered that way, how that we can be, like you're saying, asking those questions where we can be transparent to show how it's being broken down, we're getting our portion, and then, as you said, that cost, what's the cost versus, savings if we did it here?
Right, because there is a cost to collecting that money.
Well, yeah, and if that's gonna be done by each locality, then I see no reason for that money to be thrown into a central account and then dispersed.
Right.
If we've gotta set up and raise it, or whatever, then we need to keep that in it needs to go in our general
It
fund.
sounds like the Commissioner of Revenue needs to be involved.
Involved in the discussion, yeah.
There was one question that I got to thinking about after I listened to that, and I meant to go back and listen to it a couple more times, but I didn't have time. And that's the stamping machines.
Right,
All right, do we have to buy one
I would have,
and get somebody to stamp them?
yeah.
That's where the, if you had 2 or 3 localities, maybe it,
And that was, that was the idea.
get them, everybody go in together, buy that stamping machine and share the cost of doing all that, because you order so many stamps with 8,000, something like that.
And that was the idea, is that it was a regional stamp that got put on and that we shared the cost.
Well, let's see, you're gonna have to have a massive number of them. Because a carton of cigarettes being sold, if we're doing the stamping, instead of the manufacturer or whoever stamp on the carton, on each individual sold pack, it's gonna have a stamp individually on it. Same thing with chewing tobacco or whatever.
Understood that video, this thing opens the carton, stamps it, and
Stamps
then
and then
goes
closes
back
it, yeah.
as it comes out.
Yeah, the carton isn't stamped, all of the packs are stamped in the carton.
And
I remember that
this
when I was
stuff
little with my.
comes in 5-can rolls with plastic on the
Yeah,
outside of it.
straight
So
there.
it's gonna have to open that, stamp each one, close it back and re-shrink wrap it, because these are not, some of these are not for individual sale.
Right.
What did you get out of that? You,
No, I have not looked at that yet, you sent it, but, what my thought was, if you would like, I can certainly, look at that and also reach out to Mr. Bird and kind of see where the regional approach is, and, try to talk to some other localities. And, then in addition to that, if you would like, I feel like that's kind of one set of things, just do some background on our behalf, and then at some point, if you want us to also have a conversation with the Commissioner of Revenue about what kind, because they're probably also hearing some other things.
Right, rumblings.
So that might be useful to, and then I can bring that back to you all when we discuss this again. This is what we've found so far.
Is
The
there a
Texas are
state,
pretty,
is there a state stamp on the pack of cigarettes now? Does the manufacturer have to do that when they bring it in?
See if Mr. Strauss has.
But
Oh, yeah, that's right, he's done. That's right.
do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah.
So for us to have one, there would have to be, or somebody here in the year about, there'd have to be a central location for every single truckload to come in, be unloaded off. That makes no sense. It looks to me like that if we parallel the state,
Mhm.
because I don't think there's a central location or a location in the state where every truckload of cigarettes that's coming into the state of Virginia comes in and some state employee sitting there running them through a stamping machine. I think those stamps are actually put on at the factory.
Yeah,
But it's probably easier for them to say these are going to Virginia. It might be a lot harder for them to say this pack's going to Floyd, this one's going
Right.
to Carroll, this one's
Yeah.
going to Patrick.
Right.
The same guy's doing the delivery. Yeah, man, this sounds like a regional approach does sound like it would be
yeah, and I think that's why.
some help as far as being able to get all that done.
The reason I raise that, as long as they've got a Virginia stamp on them, do we really care if they have a Floyd County or a New River Valley stamp?
You have to,
You
it's
have
by
to.
law.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you have to.
You know, tobacco goes a long way back.
Well, I understand that, but I don't understand the reasoning for that, simply because this may end up being cost prohibitive.
Yeah, it's usually, my experience in North Carolina, if I might, Mr. Chair, that's all about enforcement. So then someone could come in at your local convenience store and say, oh, this doesn't have a stamp. And then that becomes a problem for the convenience
Correct.
store.
So that's the sheriff's office problem.
no, I remember years
All
ago,
things to be
couldn't
researched.
resist. Forgive me.
years ago, the town had an officer that was actually going around town selling cigarette stamps.
See if they had a Virginia stamp.
And I remember, used to, when we had the teletype system, we would get a bolo on a tractor trailer maybe coming feed with stamps going, cigarettes going to New York that had been hijacked because they hadn't been stamped. So they was taking them to New York bootlegging.
Yeah.
So apparently they have to stamp them here.
There's a case not too long ago recently with a bread truck or something. They're coming from New York. So there's something there.
My experience with sheriffs, there's definitely something there. I didn't get a lot of that.
Another interesting twist to the idea of taxation. Marijuana taxes.
That's been suggested to me too.
And, I was reading a little bit about that last night, and that, what made me think about it is talking about
Who's tax?
taking it out of state and that type of thing. There's probably gonna be some pressure from that, just to, North Carolina doesn't have legalization yet, some of that kind of stuff.
It's gonna be a nightmare.
It's probably gonna be interesting.
Well, and then along with that, it suggested to me that, and I won't pronounce it correctly, I call it Cabela's, but that's the outdoor store.
Don't do that.
I do too.
I like it.
But the oils that's being sold from,
Yeah.
yeah, from him, is that being taxable as well?
Okay. Well, I mean,
I don't know if it is, I haven't checked on that.
I don't think it is right now, I don't know.
Yeah, if marijuana is taxable, I think we need to jump on it.
Absolutely, stands the lawyer.
Yeah.
If we're gonna have a hard time getting in front of it, you know, so.
Correct.
The interesting
Might as well
thing,
get it
I was
passed.
reading about the bill that passed was, the way it's written is under, economically challenged locations have a higher chance of getting a permit
Right.
for growing and selling than, advantaged areas. So they said Southwest Virginia is probably going to be the hub for growing. And,
Russell, Wise.
Maybe we need to put a garden department
well, I mean,
in the budget.
there may be, I don't know how it works, but there may even be, because it's not finalized yet, but
Yeah, I know.
there may be taxation on the growth side of it too. I don't know. I don't know where, there may be some opportunities to kind of watch and see where it goes.
Yeah, we gotta stay on top of it though.
Yeah, can we add that, Mr. Chairman, to the list of looking into things with taxation?
I think it's a.
Because some of the way the bill is written, from what I understand, is you have a certain time period to do it and then you can't do it after.
Correct.
Probably.
Right, they usually-
Pretty
Sure.
There's a window of opportunity, and if
Exactly.
you don't get in that window, it's closed pretty darn quick.
And it's probably gonna be hard, I would imagine, to find a vendor. It's probably gonna be nestled in some place.
Yeah, so we need to
And
stay
that's probably something
aware.
that, we need
It's
to.
not like they do it on purpose.
Well, I could see, in all honesty, I could see it be done in a way that would be regulated by the state, and then localities get a
Sliver.
portion.
The article I read said there was some part of it that you could have, that you could take action on until the end of 2022, and then after that it was closed, so.
I'm interested to see what happens with the distinct difference between the federal regulations and the state regulations.
It's gonna be a mess. It's a lot of case law.
The enforcement side, I can see it.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Because right now, I mean, I can see it's gonna be really difficult because legalized hemp, I mean, no longer can you smell the odor and think that you're.
Yeah.
Cause I've known several people now that are using products, smoking products for beneficial or whatever.
Right.
Medical.
Imagine.
And I swear, every time I run into them, I'm like, just the odor on their clothing and stuff, it's like a cigarette smoker that you can smell.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh, I don't know if I can walk around in public, like,
I'm not sure that a portion of that, however, in this way out there,
yeah.
that needs to go to, service-based agencies, local wise, which is, apart from
Sure.
the education, apart from the rehabilitation measures that may or may not be associated with the use of these products, I can't ignore the vast amount of information that's there professionally of the local burden that it puts on resources.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's my biggest concern. So if we get there, we need to be mindful. There's probably a considerable amount of
Cost
that.
will probably be higher.
Cost will be high, yes. That's what I'm saying. too.
But if we don't jump on that,
Then it's going to affect us adversely right off the
correct,
get.
right off the bat.
That's what I said when
Right.
we get in front of it.
It's nothing but a full-out drain right from the start. At least the other way, you may have something to help compensate
Let
some.
some offset,
It's going to go from EMS to the DSS.
correct.
To enforcement measures.
CSDs,
Everything.
every aspect,
And it's going to. So,
education.
Chair, if I might, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I might. So I'll take that on as to also research that both on the revenue options, potential options and expenditure side, along with looking at the tobacco tax. The other thing I would note is I think you all are absolutely correct in thinking this is coming very quickly. I would note that in the Fredericksburg area, when I left, one of the largest economic development prospects they were looking at was a production facility, because of course that's off of 95. So these are big companies now that are coming into
Tobacco
this.
companies are
So
looking at it. Yeah.
it's not just, local folks kind of thing.
Right.
These are big productions, so those folks, to your point, are planning
Yep.
far ahead, because it's business.
I mean, there's people that's just waiting on go, and that's done.
Oh, yeah.
Here we
Yeah,
are,
they're
figuring out,
on
how
top
to
of it.
get it.
Yeah, there's people that have been planning this for 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's several of the hemp facilities that part of the reason they went through that first process,
Was to position themselves.
position themselves where they already have the equipment, already have the stuff for when marijuana is fully legalized.
It's a place right on I-81.
Raleigh.
Yep, right, I-81 is ready.
We better get back to
What we are talking
Well,
about?
we're
We're
talking
talking
about
about revenue.
Yeah.
Dreaming about it.
If we could just get them to legalize stills now, then we could really have on production.
I know a sheriff right now is probably spinning in his grave.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think he'll ever stay in alcohol.
Never say never. I can remember when they said there was no way in the world they would ever legalize anything with marijuana or hemp, so.
Yeah.
Now, the next group could come in, everything could change face, and the next group come in and go right back to the way it was prior too.
Well, I think there's gonna be a lot of changes, because the way the General Assembly's working, the country will have 3 elections in 3 years. So, you could see some major fluctuation as we go through, because there could be some major turnover.
Well, I don't know, once you let this one out of the barn door, I don't think you're
With the
supposed to do that.
census, and I get
It'll be
this
more control.
from Charles Poindexter,
It'll never.
everybody's gonna be running on the districts based the way they are right now, because census is not gonna be completed until the 23rd of September. So after everything's done, the redistrict's done, you could have people that were duly elected to office due to the change in the census and due to the redistricting lines that are suddenly out of office and have jurisdictions that they have no representation.
That's why there's a possibility of having the election 3 years.
Correct.
Right.
They won't make that happen.
Just,
They don't want that to happen.
They don't want to happen, but it looks like that's what's going to happen, could
I don't
happen.
know.
I wonder if that's the reason Nick decided he's not going to run for re-election. If he knows something.
When did he decide that?
Yesterday, was it?
Really? Did he have somebody in waiting like Mr. Smith did?
I doubt it.
I'm sorry, forgive me. Forgive me.
I just think he was done though, Mr. Chairman. I think his disinterests are taking more of his time. I think is part of it.
Now,
I say a lot of things I shouldn't have, you'll get used to it. There's no filter, I'm
Me
sorry.
me and you tied for first on that one.
Well, at least Nick lived in the district, he didn't move in there.
Yeah, there you go. And I agree with you on that other one. So.
Now, see, you said if you kept me quiet, it'd go faster.
That's the working parts.
Are we ready for expenditures?
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go, I'll see you all.
You gonna see us next time?
I just want to give you a little bit of an overview of what departments requested and what I had put in the county administrator's net. And then I wanted, after that, to talk a little bit about things that have come up since then. The first thing is, I had put in a one-step increase for all county employees. I had not assumed anything for constitutional officers because that was obviously in great flux. So this current budget does not look at constitutional officers. Some of the things that had been requested, one of the first ones I wanted to point out to you is I had gone with the electoral board's recommendations with how many elections they thought there might be in fiscal year 22, and the county having to pay for the curbside voting, which this past year we did out of CARES money, which was wonderful, but it was very expensive. But I went with their recommendations on that. They have also asked for a local supplement for the registrar position because they keep trying to get that to be better funded by the state and it keeps getting cut at the last minute. And I went with their recommendation, so that's in there that you see.
Although I understood from what I read somewhere that was actually receiving favor.
Well, it did last year, and then at the very end,
Yeah.
they cut. So for right now, I've got it locally funded, but
That's the current time.
the curbside
Yeah, and
and the
her
registrar is increasing salary. Yeah. One of
22,000, the increase in salary.
the sheriff's office asked for an additional SRO to have in all 5 schools. I did not recommend that, and my reason is twofold. One, next year will be the last year of the grant funding, so we'll be having to pick that up locally anyway. But also, I hate to say it, but I feel like the push to have SROs everywhere has sort of shifted here lately.
Right.
And I don't know how much support there will be for continuing state funding. So I can see that becoming totally local funded in the future. So
Yeah,
while
I think
I
that's
totally agree with Sheriff Craig's desire to have it all there, I did not put it in the budget. It was totally
Okay.
because of what I see happening at the state level.
Circumstances.
He did also ask for a part-time database or data entry person. And I did include that recommendation in the county administrators because I can see where that would be very beneficial to the sheriff's office. And it was not nearly as expensive as a full-time salary person, but I can see where they would get a lot of benefit without a whole lot of cost. The animal control requested that the part-time animal control person become a full-time salaried position. And I did not include that. When Mr. Marshall had given that to me, he was thinking salary only and not realizing that if we made it full-time salary, we also had to provide all the benefits. And it went from making it like a $25,000 position to when you add 12 months of health insurance and VRS and everything else, it really upped it. When I pointed that out to him, I mean, it adds about 1/3 of the cost again.
Right.
I said, "You still want to leave your request?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." But boy, I had a hard time
Right.
justifying that kind of increase. Maybe he needs to come talk to you. Maybe there is, because his reasoning was to extend the hours at animal control at the town. I don't know, maybe there has been complaints that there aren't enough hours, but if there are, I have not heard them.
Yeah.
But
I think it's the hours that are open, not necessarily,
More.
you know, I mean, I think people are fine with 40. I hear the same thing on the waste,
Well, definitely
More
the
so.
waste, definitely the
more
waste.
so on that, but.
Yeah, I have not heard it on animal control, but maybe he has heard some stuff. I
And
don't
one
know.
time, I think years ago, if I remember correctly, we had it where, like, they work a half a day Wednesday, part of the crew would, and then they would work all day Saturday. Or, you know, some other, now, I'm not advocating going back to that, I'm just saying there were some options back then. And most of them seemed to like it. You didn't have the same ones working every Saturday or the same ones off every Wednesday. It kind of rotated.
Right.
And I think we have more employees now than we did then
And
over
which one are we talking about? Waste?
waste.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But it's something, I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
technically, the animal control, that's up to the sheriff, the hours that he says, because they're actually under the sheriff's.
Except we would have to fund the position.
Correct.
Right, we fund the positions, but I'm talking about as far as hours of operation. I'm not trying to push the can down the road, but the sheriff can set the hours over it any way he deems fit. Because if I ever, I wasn't on the board when that agreement was reached, and I think it was understood that the sheriff basically took that over, didn't he? Within reason. I mean, we still do the regulation part, but
I've got the agreement between the sheriff's office and the county. I honestly I don't know it in enough detail. I know it's a partnership. They're
Correct.
doing the staffing and us doing some of the oversight, but I'm not sure as far as hours.
That's what I was thinking, that he provided body and vehicles, basically stuff like that.
And we
And then
said,
the county set hours and
Well,
whatever.
then I would, if we went to talking about changing the hours for that, I would want his involvement.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So did you say, I'm sorry, I've gotten off track, that was included or not in control?
I did not include it. I just, unless he can explain why he feels like there needs to be more hours. I just had not heard anything about people saying, I wanted to go over to animal control and it wasn't open and I don't have access. But there might be something, I just have not heard any complaints.
Does the Humane Society still help out over under the current situation?
I do not believe so.
Not as much as they used to.
I don't believe so.
they're creating their own,
You're correct. They're building their own,
Facility?
facility.
Really?
Yes.
Well, that's,
they had a donation to buy some property and they did. And that's part of what's in our budget.
okay.
For recreation, I had asked Jacob to include, because he keeps wanting to build a whole community center, which is a great idea down the line. But I told him, you know, we're certainly not there yet, but maybe we ought to put in the cost of at least adding 1 or 2 fields on that property above the high school. And that maybe each year if you could put that in. I wasn't expecting $800,000. He put in $800,000 for 2 fields and a parking lot. He's just guessing an amount. I ended up putting 0. I was really picturing maybe 1 field a year, and I did not expect that kind of amount of money.
Well,
I think that the driveway and the parking lot would be more than that.
Right, yeah.
and,
Really.
Oh, yeah.
and just like grading projects we're into in other areas,
I mean, what do you think if you build a good road in?
Yeah.
To that property and a
I'm
parking
just thinking
lot.
about, I know that it's apples and oranges, but some of the projects we're trying to work on economic development was
it's
more than
more,
$1 million.
I think the key to the cost of the road is, will we want it to be included in the DDOT maintenance or not?
And if it's paved or not. That's
And if it's
another
paved
huge
or
part
not.
of that, yeah.
I'm saying those 2 things dictate your cost.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wanted to let you know this wasn't Jacob just running off.
Sure.
It was at my recommendation that instead of going for the big picture, we have a problem getting fields. Let's start small and chip away at it and bring it to your attention. But the cost was
That also kind of brings up another thing, just from thinking about the office space and stuff down at this park. If we want to build something at the larger area up here, how much do we want to invest into building an office down there?
Yeah.
Maybe 5 years from now, we don't, that we need an office at a different location.
Yeah, I agree, I think it's kind of, we haven't really seen the potential growth through the onset of COVID when we absorbed recreation and made it a department.
Right.
So we really don't know the
Yeah.
potential yet.
I got to think about that this week, and just wondering how we should go about that, because
we have an immediate need for that recreation building for 2-fold reasons. The community center, you're right, one day down the line, that recreation building may not be needed anymore, but how far down the line is it?
Right.
Well,
Could be
it may not
years.
be needed, the office part may not be needed, but I don't know that the storage area.
We're renting storage units right now for equipment.
what I'm wondering is just the size of it.
Yeah.
You know, I
That
think
was
we're
a-
thinking about 3,000 square feet.
Yeah, what if we scale it back?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Do we need that much space? Is there, I mean, you can buy, shipping container. Well, I don't know, I'm just trying to think of ideas, like if you think we're gonna try to do something over the next few years at the other location, then.
Then we need to scale this back.
Right.
Right, I mean, even if it's
You need
10
a,
years.
you need an office
No, we
and
need
some
an
kind of
office.
storage there, but it doesn't have to be,
I mean, the more we thought about it, a $350,000 price tag is a lot of money. 3,000 square feet.
Well, 250 was for the building, the other part was for remodeling
Oh,
that.
the rock,
Yeah.
okay, and that may be reimbursed,
about up
Correct.
to about 125,000.
125.
We're
But
looking
that's
at,
not in the revenue side
Correct.
projections either.
correct.
Right, so that might be,
So it might be more like 150 for the remodeling and maybe 200 to 250 for the
Right.
building.
but I mean, 3,000 square foot is the size of my house with the addition.
Mhm.
And I mean, I started walking around my house, and that's an awful big space.
If I
Well,
might, Mark
yeah.
was showing me his drawings this morning. And when you guys came in, that's what we were looking
Right.
at. So what's included in there is office space, storage space, a garage for a gator, a garage for a vehicle, and then also a space that they want to be able to do, like have tables and do some coaches to do training and that kind of thing. So what Mark and I were talking about, or I mentioned to Mark, is, well, if you're going to have that kind of space for training, can we put some kind of wall in there and at least then make that potentially available as a community room as well, so it can do double purpose if you're going to go ahead and spend the money. But that's where, to your question, Mark, that's where a lot of the space is, because it's all of those things. It's not just storage,
Sure.
or just office. It's that plus garage and
If we're gonna do that up there, I think that there we are limited to the, I don't mean this to sound the way it's gonna come across, but it's gonna, minimum storage space, minimum office space.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play the part of a blender here. That's why I like to talk. All of us to share their ideas expressively. I think, what if we adopted the approach of our shell building, because we don't know exactly how long we're gonna be up there.
Right.
Keep it a structure, maintain about the same size, because if we go up and do something somewhere else, we're still gonna need a maintenance facility. We're still gonna need a place to house equipment. Still gonna need a place, maybe not finish it, maybe not make it, a community room, but we're gonna need a structure. So I would be a little hesitant to cut back too much, but maybe not do as much finish work and make it to where it could be the big raw equipment place and do our nice stuff on the new development.
Not a Cadillac, not a
Exactly.
Pinto, but make that out of Escort.
Right. I mean, we can't even have community things right now. Hopefully that's coming to an end.
Right.
We've not even went down that course in history per se. So if we still keep it, relatively in the same size proximity, cut down on the finish work, have the bay doors and things or whatever, just kind of make it a multi-purpose. Because we're still gonna have that. We're still gonna need some sort of facility on site here, even if we ever do anything there of our future board. So just kind of those things in mind.
Once again,
Do the shell building, finish an office and whatever you need to for the storage area.
Yeah,
But
we
as
still
far as,
gotta get you a walking trail fish pond.
that's right. Yeah.
well, he's still working.
See, that raw building would be a great place to come fish for the community.
USDA fish
One of the other options also may be putting another field up there. Well, at one point, we had someone look at
Yeah.
you talked about the amphitheater.
Amphitheater, do a
There's
lower
actually
field.
enough room to put a lower field and do a multi-purpose field is what we're looking at. Basically the size of a football field with T-ball, in the corners.
Right.
So you have offset back from the multi-purpose field, you have
Right.
a small, like 30-foot or 40-foot bases, whatever they are, on T-ball. And then you could have your T-ball games, two of them going on down there, because they're not gonna hit the ball, 50 yards is plenty for them to be able to.
Well, it's been a long time since I've been down in there, but I think there's actually room for a T-ball field down there, and you could still move down and have enough room on that property to do a theater if you wanted to.
Sure, yeah.
But the thought that we had at the time was it was hard to get a full football field or soccer field in.
Yeah, you can't.
Well, not on the existing fields, you can't. There's actually enough room to put 100 yards
On that lower.
on that lower
on that
area.
lower one.
And, because we actually had some people come look at it, or they thought it was anyway, I'm not an expert. But, the idea would be you could then do your soccer, your football, the older grades in football, and then T-ball, and then you still have the other fields up top, so you'd be able to, part of the problem is if when you're on T-ball, you can't run, the other
Right.
ball fields, and so you could actually have all of them going on at one time.
Well, if we're looking at doing that.
That may
there,
be a compromise to where that's
And-
in the plans, and then you're gonna stay there, we'll have a little more.
If we're gonna be staying there and not going up here, then I'd revert back to what we were talking about on doing down there. The only thing is, we gotta locate. I know there was compaction down there, but I don't know if it was
I think
compaction.
you're gonna have to redo.
That's what I'm afraid of for this building. Because the primary place for a road to work out to get down there is going right, extending on out of the parking lot. You put a building across it, then you blocked it. So if you move the building one way or the other, I'm not sure that was compacted to a standard that would hold the building up. There may have to be some core drilling.
I would be interested to know the cost savings of just doing like we did with the EDU and that building up. Just meeting the need for the immediate right now, keeping the size, and making it where it could be finishable, and seeing what the cost savings may be.
In stages.
In stages, yeah, just say, hey, 24 walls through, plumbing and office space right now, a little later, and electric, a little later.
Now we're gonna make
We're gonna
these
occupy.
cabinets.
The electrical and plumbing would need to be put into whatever the
Correct.
finishing thing. Because you don't want to be cutting the
You can
floor.
drop in.
You don't want to be cutting the floor up and changing it.
Or you could just put gravel on the floor.
On the unfinished part. And that way it gives you time to get in there, we see how the program develops. We see what transpires, he might
You're only gonna
say,
store lawnmowers in there, then you never need to put
we may,
Yeah.
we may get a great blessing and somebody enable us to do something bigger somewhere else.
Yeah, that's my feeling is I just don't know that I want to invest so much on that space when we have the acreage that we want to go with down the road.
I don't see anything happening up yonder in the foreseeable future.
Don't even.
But I agree with you though.
I
I mean, there
can
could be,
see something happening downstairs in the foreseeable.
oh yes, I know
There
that.
better be something happening down there.
That's what I said, let's meet the need and keep it growable. See what happens.
Important question, anybody need to take a 5-minute break?
I'll serve some fresh coffees.
Well, I bet there's a pot back there.
We could do that, yeah.
We're about halfway through, so, you know, we don't want to take 5 minutes.
Sounds good,